So this next session, I'm very pleased to welcome back Martin Blythe, who has been a strong supporter of our programme all the way through to our transitioning to advanced study skills session. Martin's our Director of Learning and Teaching from MPW Birmingham. He read Business and Management at Aston University, joined MPW in 2014 and became Director of Teaching and Learning in 2017. Martin runs the college's EPQ programme. He's a senior examiner for AQ Economics and has contributed to the creation of business and economic textbooks. On this session, it's on there on the screen for you. It's about delivering outstanding presentations. So with no further ado, Martin, over to you, please.
Thank you, Simon, for that very nice introduction. And thank you, Simon, for organising this fantastic series of 6 weeks worth of sessions, which have been very inspiring to be a part of. And, you know, I recognise some of the names in the virtual classroom already. I can see Alyssa, who was here at some previous sessions, Carlotta. I've seen people in sessions previously, and it's great to see you back to learn a little bit more about delivering presentations. Now, I don't often feel pressure, but one of the times that I feel pressure is when you have to deliver a presentation about how to deliver presentations, because the expectation is that it should be absolutely perfect and there should be no errors whatsoever. And although, you know, there is a little bit of pressure, I think, you know, one of the things I want to reassure you guys about today is that when you deliver presentations, sometimes things do go wrong. And I think some people can become completely fixated on worrying about things going wrong, that it actually puts them off from delivering a presentation at all. And it definitely takes away from the 99% of things which will go right on the day. I've seen colleagues, I've seen students do outstanding presentations, and then as soon as they're finished, all they want to talk about is the thing that went wrong, the time they got their words jumbled, the time they forgot their line, the spelling mistake on the slide. Now, obviously, you know, the more practice you do, the less likely those events are to occur. But they happen, and anyone who's ever done a presentation can definitely understand the fact that you will occasionally make a small mistake. And making a small mistake should not be a barrier to you doing presentations, and you definitely shouldn't fear them. If there's anyone in the room right now who does fear doing presentations and you don't like doing them, or maybe you even refuse to do them if your teachers assign them as a presentation homework, let me know in the comments so that hopefully I can try and reassure you directly over the forthcoming weeks, hour. Also, if you have any questions during the session, please do use the conversation box like you have in previous sessions, and I'll do my very best to answer questions as we go throughout, but I'll also answer questions at the end. Now, as Simon said right at the beginning of the session, one of the key roles which I have at MPW Birmingham is the fact that I deliver and lead the extended project qualification. And many of you who are coming over to study in the UK at MPW may want to get involved in the EPQ. And one of the key requirements of completing an EPQ is that you will have to deliver a presentation to a non-specialist audience, which means that you will have to communicate the key findings of your project to people who have no idea about the area around your topic or the area your project is focused upon. And the EPQ is one of the places where you might come into contact with the requirement to do a presentation, but don't be surprised if your A-level, your GCSE, or even your foundation teachers ask you to do presentations for homework. And those of you who do a foundation program such as IFY or NCUK, you will have to do presentations as part of your coursework assessment and as part of the English language EAP requirements. But again, it's nothing to worry about. So if you don't come into contact with presentations during your time at MPW, which is very unlikely, you will definitely come into contact with the requirement to do a presentation when you go on to study at undergraduate level. At university, the assessment model is very different to A-level, where you just sit a load of exams or do a little bit of coursework. At university, you're going to have to do different styles of assessment, such as coursework, pieces, dissertations, multiple choice tests halfway through the semester. You might have open book exams, closed book exams, but also you might have to do group work and individual and group presentations. So there are lots of things to consider when you start thinking about how to deliver your presentation. So some of the questions you might ask yourself when delivering your presentation, the first one is, what software will I use to support my presentation? Now, personally, I quite enjoy getting up in front of a group of students or a group of colleagues or a group of parents or international agents and just talking from the heart. I find that relatively easy, and I don't always need a visual stimulant. But most people do require some sort of visual stimulant to keep the presentation on track, to give good structure to the core of your presentation, and to also help your audience follow along. So obviously I'm delivering a presentation right now, ironically, about how to deliver presentations. And I'm using Microsoft PowerPoint to support the delivery of this program. Obviously, this is a webinar style presentation, and you guys are all around the world. At some point my video camera could cut out. Thankfully, it hasn't happened in the week so far we've done these sessions, but it could. So having that presentation on screen gives you the ability to follow along, especially if you don't speak English as your first language. And it also gives me small mini prompts just to help me stay on track and keep focused on my key messages. Now, Microsoft PowerPoint is one that you are probably all going to be relatively familiar with. But there are obviously other software packages available. You can use Present, you can use Prezi, you can use Google Presentations. There are lots and lots of different software options available. And in reality, you're never going to be forced by a teacher or an assessor to use one particular type of presentation software. And what I would advise you to do if you are planning a presentation and you're not familiar with many types of presentation software is to look around and see which one works best for you. Now, personally, I really enjoy watching students who use Prezi to deliver their presentations because they normally seem to be really interactive and very graphic and visually pleasing. But personally, I have no experience in using that software. And to be honest, I am a bit of a technophobe, shall we say. I'm not the best with IT, so I don't have the time or patience to learn all those skills required to master that software. But some of you might be more familiar with Prezi and you may wish to use that. But it's really important that you do pick a software which suits your function and can help you display text and images to retain your audience's interest, but also help you deliver key messages. In addition to using your presentation, you might also wish to use props. So props are often used in the EPQ to help demonstrate to the non-specialist audience how a particular process or product or theory works, but also they can help you to really engage with your audience, because if you're holding something and describing it and you're showing it to them, it has a more personal element than having a slideshow behind you. In the UK, we have a phrase which is called death by PowerPoint. And this is when people tend to overuse their software. They have too many words on the screen and they just read off the software, off the screen, and bore people to death. Whereas if you have a prop as your visual stimulant, this obviously doesn't have any words on it, so you can't just read directly from your prop, but you can describe it and you can obviously use it to enhance the relationship with your audience. And developing a relationship with your audience is really important. So you're able to demonstrate your passion and you're able to communicate your feelings. And what I would recommend, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later on, is making eye contact regularly with people in your audience. You might hear, advice from people saying, oh, pretend that the audience are all in their underwear. I definitely don't recommend that advice because A, you might go into fits of laughter, but also I would recommend that you, you actually engage with your audience. You smile at them. You use your hands to gesture to them. Maybe you even ask them questions. Now, they don't have to be direct questions. You don't have to say, Alyssa, what's the answer to this? What you would need to do is potentially say, have you ever? And by saying you're asking a rhetorical question, really, but you're making the whole of the audience think, and you're making them feel personally engaged with your presentation. In addition, before starting to plan your presentation, you need to consider what your audience's needs are. So when planning today's presentation, some of the key things which I was thinking about was, what do you guys want to learn about presentations, and when are you most likely to use presentations? And I thought about how most of you are international students and you're going to be studying either A-levels or a foundation program, or maybe doing an EPQ. So rather than directing this at like a business pitch, which I could have done business presentations, I decided to think about how A-level students might want to master presentations. So it's really important to think about what your audience's needs are. Are your audience specialists in the subject, or do they have no prior knowledge whatsoever? And again, I've made an assumption today that some of you have experience in using Microsoft PowerPoint or Prezi. I have assumed that some of you have done presentations previously, and you can reflect on your previous attempts and hopefully use these skills we're going to mention today to improve your presentations in the future. So, like I said a moment ago, it's really important that you keep to your key messages. And when planning your presentation, you might want to do a sketch on the back of a piece of paper, or maybe on an envelope, or whatever you've got to hand. I'm notoriously bad for writing on the back of envelopes, but that's where some of my best planning actually happens. And what you might want to do is just bullet point what your 3 key messages are today, or when you're delivering your presentation, and try and make them catchy and try and pitch them in a memorable way, so that people will take those home with them, and they will remember them, and they will remember that key message when reflecting on your presentation. And I have a key message, and I'll point it out to you in a moment, and hopefully you'll see what I've done to try and make it a little bit more memorable. And again, it's important that you don't drift away from your message too much. I know that some of you may have encountered teachers that like to waffle, or maybe you've been watching other students who deliver presentations, and they're waffling on and they're deviating from the key theme of their presentation. By having a structure on the screen, which you can regularly refer to, or maybe some helpful images to prompt you, that can help you to keep to your key message. What you'll notice on the slides which I've shown you so far is that I don't have any extended text on these initial slides. So if you have too much text on your slides, either your audience are going to sit there reading it and not listening to you, or you're going to be tempted to read directly from your slides. So I tend to prefer to have bullet points. And if any of you come to an EPQ session, or you have me for economics or business, you will notice that I always have bullet points and pictures. They're just prompts to make sure I don't deviate from the key message, but also to make sure that I don't read excessively from the PowerPoint, and neither do my students. Now, with presentations, it's really difficult to identify the correct length for a presentation in terms of timing. So when it comes to things like the EPQ, your EPQ supervisor or coordinator might actually impose a time limit on you. So with the EPQ, we tend to say to our students, the presentation should not be for more than half an hour. I know in one of the NCUK EAP assessments that one of their presentations has to be 10 minutes. So again, the assessment requirements for your presentation might stipulate a time. And obviously you need to keep to that time as much as possible. And by practicing your performance, you'll be able to make sure that you are keeping within that framework. Today, obviously, I'm delivering for the Ready for Excellence program, which Simon has devised, and Simon has imposed a time requirement upon me. He said that the session should be 45 minutes. It should run from 12 noon until 12:45. So there's never any sort of one-size-fits-all guidance for when it comes to the right length for a presentation. And obviously, some presentations could last for hours and hours, or even days, if you think about things like Apple product launches or Tesla product launches. Now, when it comes to doing an A-level presentation, or maybe a homework presentation or EPQ, a good framework to work to is the 10-20-30 rule. And the 10-20-30 rule basically suggests that your presentation should have approximately 10 slides. You should try and use size 20 font, and your presentation should last for 30 minutes. Now, any longer than 30 minutes and your presentation's audience might become bored or distracted. So you want to try and keep it, relatively short and, in a decent time frame to keep people engaged. So by having 10 slides, that means that you haven't, got too much information. You haven't got too many pictures. You haven't got to press that clicker too many times. And also you haven't got to spend too much time designing the slides either. In fact, you're going to only be focusing on producing 10 high quality slides rather than 50 substandard or poor quality slides. By adopting the size 20 font, you also make sure that your presentation is readable. So if we look at the screen now, the font size is size 20. It's nice and clear. It's easy to read. And if we were to amplify this presentation and blow it up on a whiteboard as per a normal lesson or presentation, again, that size 20 font would be a good size for people sat back in the audience to still be able to read. So a size 20 font is good. And what I would recommend is that you pick the size 20 font, maybe in something like Arial or Calibri, which are very reader friendly. And then I would recommend that you don't vary your font size or your font style throughout. If you have lots of different font styles and font sizes throughout, it can just look really amateur and unprofessional. What you will notice with my slides is that we have the same font throughout. We have the MPW website listed at the bottom of the screen. We have the same MPW branding throughout. This is the branding we used 2 years ago, and every year we refresh and rebrand our presentation styles to make sure that as a college, we're all on message. So whenever I deliver a presentation to staff, I use this sort of framework and template to keep it relatively visually pleasing. It's also really important to keep your audience interested and engaged. And the worst thing ever is when when a member of your audience falls asleep in your presentation. And I'll be honest, I have experienced it where I've noticed somebody in my audience fast asleep. And although that is obviously quite insulting, and it's not a nice feeling to know you've sent your audience to sleep, you want to try and reflect on what you can do better to keep your audience engaged throughout. And what you may have noticed throughout my 4 presentations during this 6 weeks of preparing for excellence is that I like to tell stories. And for those of you who joined me for the economics session, I told you stories about dogs. For those of you who joined me for the business session, I told you stories about when I worked at Marks and Spencer's and how I wanted to open a zoo. And these are all parts of my personal life. But if you can tell stories that you have a personal connection with, people tend to be more interested than if you're just reading out facts or you're just reading from a slide. And I will always use personal stories in my presentations and my lessons to try and keep my students interested, but also to apply my key messages to the real world. And I would fully recommend that you do tell stories, because people are more likely to remember that than anything else. And if I tell my students a story about something that happened in my private life, which is still relevant to economics, they're much more likely to remember the story than if I just told them the theory. The next thing, which is really important, is that you should think about how you pitch your voice. Now, I am naturally a presenter. Thankfully, I never had to think too much about, presentation skills. I know a lot of people get worried about presentations, and that's never been a fear that I have had. But pitching your voice is really important. I've been to many presentations where people stand at the front of a room or a hall, and they speak very, very quietly, and you have to listen really carefully to exactly what they're saying. So, you could tell by me changing my voice to that quiet monotone that you're probably going to send your audience to sleep if you adopt that voice throughout. So try and inject some enthusiasm to your voice. Try and make sure it's loud enough so people at the back can hear, but also so that you're not deafening the people who are right in front of you. I would say in a presentation, don't shout. Shouting would not be a good way to pitch your voice. You need to pitch your voice so it's loud enough and injects the enthusiasm you require, but not so that it deafens people or wears your voice out to the point that you can't speak anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reflect now on 7 really important tips to make sure that your presentation is a success. And my key message is that when it comes to presentations, there are 3 P's that are absolutely essential to the success of your presentation. The first P is prepare, the second P is practice, the third P is perform. And if you do all 3 of those things, there is no doubt that your presentation will be a phenomenal success, and you really will be able to deliver an outstanding session. So prepare, practice, and perform. And that really is the key message today. And like I said a moment ago, when you're thinking about how to deliver a key message, little gimmicks like this, or using alliteration, so picking 3 words that all start with the same letter, makes it easier for people to retain than if I'd have said plan, revise, and demonstrate. Plan, revise, and demonstrate would have meant almost the same thing, but it would not have been memorable. Whereas prepare, practice, perform is more likely to stick with you and be meaningful to the audience, because all those words start with the letter P. So the first thing that I would say when it comes to presentations and secrets to success is that first impressions really do count. I reckon that teachers are the hardest audience to please. So if you're presenting to teachers, they're probably going to have high standards. But also, if we ever have external speakers come in and talk to our staff body, I think within 90 seconds, we've made up our mind about whether the presentation is going to be worthwhile or not, completely based on the presentation skills of the individual. Now, it's really important that you make a good first impression. So go in enthusiastically, reaffirm how excited you are to be a part of that presentation and to have the opportunity to deliver the presentation to that audience. What you will have noticed today and in all of my sessions is that when I have come in to deliver the presentation, I thank Simon for introducing me. I then acknowledge people that I recognize from previous sessions. And also I, reaffirm how excited I am and how lucky I am to actually be in a job where I can, speak to students all over the world from many different countries about something I care so passionately about. So your first impressions really do count. If I'd have joined the meeting and all of a sudden it said, Alyssa has left the conversation, Carlotta has left the conversation, Hugh has left the conversation, that would have been really disheartening. But, by giving a good first impression and communicating my enthusiasm, you've all stayed in the room, which is really, really pleasing. And hopefully you'll gain a lot out of this. But your first impressions count before you even stand up on the stage. So if you're delivering an external presentation, or you're delivering one at university and you've been asked to wait in a certain place, your first impressions count from the minute you meet the receptionist to sign in to do the presentation, or maybe even from the moment that you meet any staff on site or any of your audience. So the way that you dress is really important. The way that I'm dressed is slightly different today compared to if I was delivering this presentation firsthand. Like Simon said, it's 31 degrees here in the UK right now. For us, that is very, very, very hot. And you know, I am dressed in a t-shirt and trousers rather than being dressed in my normal suit, which is my normal uniform that people see me dressed in. So first impressions really, really do count. Now you'll see that I've come in a plain black t-shirt. You know, if I'd have come to this session wearing my Aston Villa shirt, or maybe I'd come in with, I don't know, a pop star like Dua Lipa or Ariana Grande on my t-shirt, or maybe I've got, you know, an offensive slogan on here, that would not have given a good first impression at all. So having something plain but presentable is really, really important. And, you know, I'm also very conscious now is that with that presentations are not going to be face-to-face as frequently as they were previously. And we've seen the rise of Zoom and Microsoft Teams and House Party and many other apps, and Skype, of course. So you've got to think about what's behind you as well. So when I deliver my presentations, you can see my window in a plain room with my whiteboard, which is the essential tool of the trade. But sometimes when you join these Zoom meetings, you see people who've got lots of stuff in the background, which looks unprofessional. So it's really important that, you know, you get a nice clean space for you to present in if you are doing presentations online in the future, which I'm sure all of you will do at some point. And it's really important that you give eye contact as well. It's slightly more difficult to give eye contact when you're doing a webinar because your slides are in a different place to the camera. My slides are here, my camera is here. So, you know, it is slightly more difficult to make eye contact, and I can't see you, but hopefully, you know, you feel that we are developing a professional rapport during this presentation, regardless of not being able to give eye contact. But if you're doing a presentation face-to-face, eye contact is really important. Now, if you think about the 3 Ps, prepare, practice, perform, being prepared deserves its own shout out. It is so important that you think about how you're going to deliver your presentation, not just in terms of what your slides will look like, but in terms of what you're going to say as well. So, you know, like I said, we want to try and keep as little words on the slide as possible, because we don't want to be tempted to read that or have our audience read it. But we do want to make sure that we have enough to talk about in each slide. So it's important you familiarize yourself with the contents of your slides and the content of your slide on as many occasions as possible. So I made this presentation a couple of weeks ago when Simon asked me to do the presentation. I then last night, about 9:30, did a final revision of this. So I've probably done 2 or 3 revisions between 2 weeks ago and last night. Last night at 9:30, did a final revision and looked at my slides and familiarized myself with the content. And then at about 9 o'clock this morning, I also went through the slides again to make sure I knew exactly what was coming up. Now, whenever I deliver a presentation to a live audience, I also keep a printed copy of the slides with me until the minute I am going to present. Because even if one of my colleagues is presenting, the likelihood is, because of my role, I know exactly what my colleague is going to say. So if the principal is going to deliver a message to staff, I already know what the message is. I don't really need to listen to it. So I often use that time to just go through my slides and make sure I know exactly what I'm going to say. So I'm in the right frame of mind to immediately deliver my content. Now, one of the things which I would definitely encourage you to prepare for is people asking questions. Now, it may be a requirement of your assessment that you will have questions at the end of your presentation, or it might be that people, think of questions throughout and they put their hand up. Now, when people put their hand up during a presentation, it's quite off-putting. So what I normally do when I start my presentation is I say, I'm going to deliver this presentation and then I will happily take questions at the end. And if you think back half an hour, that's exactly what I said as soon as I started talking. I said, I'm looking forward to deliver this presentation. Please put your questions in the chat box and I will then answer them at the end. Now, in theory, you could be putting questions in there all the way throughout and I could answer them on the spot. But when you're doing it live, it is quite off-putting when people put their hand up. And also, people can start to take over if questions lead to even more questions. So I try to encourage people to ask them at the end. Now, it may be that your presentation you're delivering might have a hostile response. So sometimes you might be asked to present bad news. And what I would say is that you should state something like, I'm very happy to take questions at the end of the session over a cup of coffee. Or maybe I'm very happy to answer any of your individual questions during the break. So you're not allowing there to be a public forum for the questions. So when I've had to deliver bad news in the past, I've always said I will answer your questions individually. Even though the answers for some people's questions may have benefited others, if you fear that people might actually attack your idea or attack your news and be hostile, it's probably better to answer questions individually. And also think about what questions could be asked. And one good way to, again, reassure your audience that you are professional and you are an expert is to say, many of you may have been thinking, or many of you probably want to ask, and then ask the question which you know they're bound to ask and answer it. And again, that just shows that you understand the mentality and the thinking of your audience. The third key tip is don't waffle. So many people can waffle during their presentation, and that's why it's really important to have your key messages displayed as bullet points on your slides. For me, the best presentations are the one where there are just pictures, and the pictures themselves are enough to prompt the speaker to remember exactly what they are going to say. But don't deviate too much from your key messages and from your slides, and also don't waffle during your answers to your questions, because if you waffle, people are likely to be skeptical at the extent to which you are an expert, and also they're more likely to become bored, or they're more likely to remember that your presentation was a failure. Quite often we see our good friend Boris Johnson in the UK delivering updates about the coronavirus. I believe one has happened in the last 35 minutes, and my Apple Watch has been going crazy. But it's really important that you don't deviate from that message and you give concise answers. When Boris Johnson waffles on and on and on, people will go on Twitter and they will talk about how he is a bumbling buffoon. That's not my personal opinion. That's the term which is being used in the press to describe him, because he waffles on and on and doesn't always know the answers. What I would fully recommend to you is that if you aren't sure on how to answer a question, it's okay to just say, let me just think about this for a second, or let me just take a moment to process that. And by buying yourself 5 seconds, you're more likely to give a concise answer, which actually gets to the heart of the question, rather than giving something which is irrelevant and is too long in length. The next thing which is really important is that you are really positive. You have to be a positivity monster. You need to stand up at the front of your audience, and you can be positive about your findings, your research, the opportunity. Like I said, I always like to thank people for giving me the opportunity to present, and just convey that passion that you have for being able to speak to people about something you really care about. And when you're presenting, people might have come with pre-built misconceptions about your idea, or maybe they might be slightly biased. But if you're positive about your viewpoint and your ideas, people are more likely to buy into what you are presenting. Audiences really do enjoy watching people who are positive and enthusiastic, and people who like the challenge of presenting and answering questions as well. And the audience will feed off your positivity. body language is also really, really important. So without hesitation, you should present your presentation by standing up. One of the questions I get asked by my students all the time is, can I sit here and do it? No, you can't sit there and do it. Unless you've got a good reason to be sitting, I think you should stand up with good posture and deliver your presentation confidently. Sitting down and spinning on the office chair or kicking your legs back and forwards or leaning back on your chair is not a good look for presentation. People should be stood up. It demonstrates authority, composure, even expertise. People will be influenced by your body language on the extent to which you really know about your presentation. If you sit down, it demonstrates that you are nervous and you need to be comforted and have that sense of being grounded. During your presentation, don't fold your arms and talk like this the whole time. Again, that does not give a good look to your presentation. It can make people, feel that you're tense, or maybe that you're arrogant if you're convinced that it's your idea or no other alternative. And also, it's really, really important that you make eye contact with the audience and not the floor. Looking down at the floor is one way to really put off your audience. If I was sat here for the whole presentation, just looking down at my desk and not really, making eye contact with the webcam, it would soon become apparent that I was disinterested. So by, having good shoulders, posture, by using my hands regularly to demonstrate or emphasize is really important. And, it's critical to think about your body language as much as it is the presentation content which you are going to deliver. Now, for some people, it can be very difficult to deliver a verbal overview of your content and think about your body language. And that's why practice is so important. We mentioned the 3 Ps: prepare, practice, perform. Practice is critical to performance. They're sequential. You can't practice without preparing, and you can't perform without practicing. You need to practice your pitch, maybe by yourself in your bedroom, your office, a quiet space. You then need to find maybe a teacher or a friend or family who will offer you honest advice about your body language and about your pitch and your presentation content. And then once you've received that honest feedback, you need to go back to the prepare stage and you need to make amendments to your body language, your pitch, your tone, and also to your presentation slides as well. So it's really important that you do a rehearsal and you get some feedback from somebody who's willing to be honest about your performance levels. It's really important that you expect unexpected questions as well. We mentioned that you might get asked questions you were preparing for, which is great because you've got a pre-rehearsed answer. But it is also unlikely that you will sometimes get asked questions you had never, ever, ever thought about. And this happens not just in presentations, but also in interviews. And I've included a fact here from Office Angels, a survey result. And they said that during interviews, 90% of employers ask killer questions. Now, interviews themselves are developing to be more than just a face-to-face interview, but to be part of MMI sessions, multiple mini interviews, where you might have to do a face-to-face session, a presentation, a problem-solving task. And during those presentations, you might be asked the world's most unexpected question. In reality, if you're doing it as part of an interview process, all they're looking for is that you don't freak out under pressure and you remain composed. But if you are asked a question that you genuinely have no idea about, I would admit it, but admit it in a careful way. So rather than say, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question, which makes it sound like you're not prepared, you need to say something which makes them believe you're going to go away and find out the answer, or that the answer itself isn't necessarily readily available. So saying something like, you've asked a really fantastic question. I truly believe that more research should be done to ensure that we can answer your question more effectively in the future is better than saying, I don't know. By saying what I just said about, praising their question, because, it's a good question, and then saying that you believe that more research should be done to provide a comprehensive answer to the question illustrates that you've got the willingness and ability to go away and find out exactly what the answer was. And then you could say something like, as soon as my team, or as soon as I have the answer for that question, I'll be in touch to let you know the outcome. And that again just shows that you're proactive and that you are competent. Saying I don't know or I didn't have time to look at that just illustrates that you're unprepared and you're not an expert. So, think carefully about the way that you answer those killer questions in your presentations. And also in presentations, it's really important to develop rapport. Develop rapport with the people who have asked you to present, but also develop a rapport with your audience. Demonstrate energy, demonstrate enthusiasm, show your sense of humor, and don't forget to smile. Don't forget to smile at members of your audience. If you're sat there with a really miserable face, stood there with a really miserable face, and you're talking in a very monotone way and showing no excitement about your presentation whatsoever, and you're boring your audience to death, then nobody's going to invite you back to present again. You won't get the job if you're asked to present as part of an interview. You'll get a low score on your EPQ or your EAP. So make sure that you really do develop a rapport with your audience. And like I said, ask rhetorical questions. I've delivered to audiences of a couple of hundred people, and although you can't ask them all a direct question, you can ask them a rhetorical question. You can say, I'm sure all of you have wondered what would happen if, or what would you do if X, Y, Z? So, you ask them a question that doesn't need an answer, but it gets them thinking, and it gets them to a point psychologically that they believe they are, answering your question, or they are having that direct rapport and that direct conversation with you. And what I would say is that if you do engage in significant preparation, you practice, you will be able to perform. And if we think back a couple of moments ago, I said that it's impossible to work out the perfect length presentation when you are given strict requirements by maybe an assessor or by a colleague. And like I said at the beginning of the presentation, Simon asked me to do a presentation for 45 minutes about presentation skills. And here we are. I have prepared, I have practiced, and now I have performed this presentation for 45 minutes, as the time has just turned 12:45. So if you do those 3 Ps, then you're guaranteed to be able to secure and deliver an outstanding presentation. So don't forget to practice, prepare, and perform. If you have any questions whatsoever about delivering presentations as part of an interview, as part of an EPQ, foundation program, A-level homeworks, please do not hesitate to let me know in the comment box. And thank you once again, everybody, for your time. And I wish you the very best with your future studies, as I appreciate it is the last session I will be delivering to you via the Ready for Excellence program that Simon has devised.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you very much. So as per normal, we give the audience a couple of minutes for questions. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box. It's obviously you've had a masterclass today around presentations. So I can see a question coming in now, Martin, yeah. Please. So if you want to carry on.
Brilliant. So the question from Maxim. Hi, Maxim. Are there any particular tips you might give to people who have anxiety when it comes to the actual presentation delivery and are afraid of messing up along the way, despite preparing and rehearsing beforehand? It's a really good question, Maxim, and I appreciate that many students have exactly the same problem when it comes to presentations. They feel very anxious despite all the work and effort which they've done. And I think, it's really important to understand the mindset of your audience as well. So if you're doing a presentation for EAP or for NCUK or for A-levels or homeworks, let your teacher know in advance that you are nervous. Honestly, reach out. Go back to that tip about developing rapport. If you know you've got a presentation and you know who your audience are, let them know, if it's a teacher, that you're a little bit nervous, because your teacher on the day then will do exactly whatever they need or you need to make you feel comfortable. That might be that your teacher arranges for you to go last or first, depending on whether you rather get it over and done with. Your teacher can then adjust their body language to be incredibly supportive. But I would also just like to emphasize the point about, during a presentation, even if you're nervous, 95 to 99% of the stuff you do will be absolutely perfect. It will be phenomenal. But what anxious people tend to fixate on is the 1% of things that went wrong. So during most presentations, something will go wrong, but people won't even realize. I noticed one mistake in my presentation today, but I would happily bet money that none of you noticed the same mistake that I did. But I will go away now and beat myself up about that one mistake. But what you should do is just realize that actually nobody realized. I'm sure all of you right there now are thinking, oh, that was a great presentation. Martin didn't make any mistakes. I don't know how he does it. But I noticed that one mistake. It probably is just you as the presentation expert, which is noticing any mistakes that you have. So please don't fixate on mistakes. Let your teacher know in advance, and they will do the best they can to reduce your anxiety. Practice with friends and family where possible. Maybe even record your own presentation to watch back, and you'll realize it's not as bad as you think it is. So maybe get like a light ring or balance your phone up against some books, record yourself and watch it back, and you'll see it's not as bad as you think it is when you are stood on that spot. And in the event that you freeze during a presentation, so you forget stuff, don't panic, don't worry. It happens to the very best of people. People do freeze, people do forget stuff. Just be composed. Maybe even say to the audience, do you mind if I just take a minute? Because everybody will understand. Nobody in that audience is going to go, no, get off the stage. Everyone's going to be like, yeah, sure, no problems, whenever you're ready. And that will reassure you and give you the minute you need to collect your thoughts and then deliver the rest of the presentation. You will not be marked down by your A-level teacher, your foundation year teacher, your EPQ teacher, if you say, do you mind if I take 1 minute just to collect my thoughts? They're going to actually probably mark you more highly for having, the courage to admit that and to do that during your presentation. So hopefully that's been helpful for you, Maxim. So Jessica's also asked a question. When we asked a rhetorical question, should we wait for the audience to answer before we continue? So if it's a rhetorical question doesn't really need an answer. So, I could say a rhetorical question such as, have you ever wondered what it would be like if university education was free for all? And the answer is yes or no, and you may have images in your mind of what a free university education might look like. But I'm not going to ask for Alyssa, Diogo, Jessica, Iona, DP, Leo to answer this question. You're all going to have your own answers in your mind, but I will never hear any of them because I'm going to answer my own rhetorical question. So I could have started today's presentation by saying, have you ever wondered what it takes to deliver an outstanding presentation? And I just pause for 3-4 seconds maybe, and then answer for them. If you have wondered what it takes to deliver an outstanding presentation, then you've come to the right place, because today I'm going to talk to you about my 7 tips for delivering an outstanding presentation. And even though they're not giving a verbal response to the question, they've answered it in their head, and immediately they psychologically feel as if they've had that direct conversation with you, even though you haven't heard their answer. But it's a really good question, Jessica. Leo's asked about where the recordings for the sessions will be. I'm confident that Simon will share those with you early next week. If you have any other questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to ask. I hope that for Jess and Leo and Maxim, I've answered your questions in the best possible way. If you do have any questions whatsoever, then obviously don't hesitate to email at ready@mpw.ac.uk, which is the email which Simon has regularly shared with you. Thank you all so much. Alyssa, best of luck with setting up your business. Like I said, I'm still telling everybody about that. So best of luck with setting up your business to reduce the gender opportunity gap. Thank you, Maxim. Thanks, Simon.
Okay, so Martin, thank you. As I said at the beginning, you've been one of the most regular contributors to these sessions, so we're very grateful. Thank you. As I mentioned in the chat, we will be sharing the recordings at the beginning of next week for the final time. And we have only 10 minutes. Now we have 10 minutes now until our penultimate session, which is with James Barton, who's our Director of Admissions from MPW London. And that will be around our MPW life, and particularly around progression and alumni, and where does our education take you? So we will be ready for that session in just under 10 minutes. So if you want a quick cup of tea or coffee, then that's absolutely fine. Martin, thank you one last time for today. Thanks, and stay safe, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.
See you soon, Simon. Take care.